Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just violent bass.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who once faked his own death to get out of a bad dinner date, Mr. Ryan Seabold!
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
It is going well. It's going well. It's going better than you on that date, man, huh?
Yeah, so to the listeners, just gonna put this out there. The date was with Jason, and he won't fucking let it go. He just keeps bringing it up, and now it's gonna be on
Listen,
air.
I'm sorry. You wouldn't
history.
talk about it with me off the air, so I had to bring it here up in front of our listeners. Go ahead.
Well, I will say it was hard to fake my own death and then still come on the show with you to continue the podcast. Busted. Not much I can do about that. But yeah, you're a hard one to go out to eat with. You chew with your mouth open. Okay, you're an open mouth chewer, and that's weird. I don't want to be around it. It's gross. Yeah. So I just I faked my own death with Seppuku.
Okay, but the thing. It was a really weird way to do it. So let me paint the picture for you guys. Like, me and Ryan are sitting here. We're having what I thought was a fine time. And all of a sudden, Ryan like starts busting out his phone. Okay. Now, I don't know about you guys here, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm just old school or something like that. I'm not down with the busting out the phones and like scrolling or texting other people. Like, you and I are here for dinner. Let's be in the moment. Let's be present. Let's have a nice conversation. Right. And then all of a sudden, Ryan just keels over and lets his face fall into his soup. And at first I'm like, okay, this motherfucker's trying to get out of it. Solid 7.5 minutes. Guy didn't come up for air.
Yeah,
and
but
so
that took training, man. Like, you have to appreciate the commitment to the bit. Like, I worked so hard. Michael Phelps
I was going to say,
style.
dude, like, so now that we're on the other side of it, you have to, I was going to say, you have to have done some sort of training to be able to, like,
I absolutely
survive
did.
that long, 7.5 minutes without breathing in soup.
Yeah. It's a new skill I have. I put it on my LinkedIn profile. Can hold breath in soup for 7 minutes. Pretty solid.
That sounds like a skill that was perfected on like a porn set. Well, I don't want to get overly graphic on here. Never mind. Perhaps edit that part out, Ryan.
I will not, sir. No, I mean, yeah, it's Florida. You learn to hold your breath doing all kinds of things in Florida. Yeah.
But I think we all know where I was going with that one.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's like I think it was the first 2 songs in Dark Side of the Moon. So I would get that going and see how many songs in I could get through before I had to come up for air. I think I made it through 2. I almost 3, not quite the Great Gig in the Sky. Once you start getting to that, I had to definitely take a big gasp. It also, interesting bit of trivia, it depends on the soup. You would think that it's just a breath situation. It's not. The viscosity of the soup can definitely fuck with your brain a little bit to see where when you need to come up for air. It's all psychological, this big psychological game. But I will say it worked, and I was able to cut the date short. But, now I just have to hear it about it for eternity, so whatever.
Yeah, little did he know that he would be stuck on a radio program with me a year and a half later, so sucks to be you, buddy. Couldn't get away from you that easily. Hey, what do you got for us and the listeners this week?
This week, we're covering Harakiri from Masaki Kobayashi from 1962. IMDB has this as, when a Ronin requesting seppuku at a feudal lord's palace is told of the brutal suicide of another Ronin who previously visited, he reveals how their pasts are intertwined, and in doing so, challenges the clan's integrity. This is from 1962. we got a lot going on here. We got this won the jury prize at 1965 Cannes Film Festival. Again, being an international film, these movies tend to get released at various dates throughout, especially back in the 60s, I guess. It also got an Academy Award nomination for Best Foreign Language Film. This was a beautiful movie by Kobayashi. I'd never seen a Kobayashi film. Had you, Jason?
No, Ryan, actually, I have not. This was my first. And I was kind of interested to find that, like, he didn't actually do that many films over the course of his career. It
Correct.
seems like the ones that he did were very prolific, but that he didn't have a giant body of work the way that Kurosawa did or someone like him.
Right. Yeah, I was in the same boat because once I saw this, I actually really did enjoy this film. And I wanted to know what else I could watch by him. Answer, not too much. Except
unless you want that 9-hour epic that he came out around
you saw
the
that
same
too?
time. Like,
yeah, The Human Condition.
Yeah.
9 hours and 40
Yeah.
minutes of The Human Condition. Which
it's apparently a trilogy, but you're supposed to watch it all together at the same time. Like,
yeah, right. I would say that by the end of that, I would feel The Human Condition. Just hopeless and ready to drown myself in soup. So
I think there's another film by Bela Tarr called Santan Tango, and I believe that's not even a trilogy. It's one film that's 9 hours long.
Jeez.
And that's actually available on Canopy, my beloved Canopy, which is that free streaming service that you use with your library card.
Yep.
And yeah, so I haven't seen. Bela Tarr is, again, one of those people that has like 5 or 6 films to his name, kind of like a Tarkovsky or Kobayashi or any of these guys that we're talking about, where they did a lot with a little. But no, I did see one of the films that he did called Werkmeister Harmonies, and it's like a brilliant film. I love it, and it's probably about like 2 hours 45 minutes long, right? So that's like, to me, a long film, right? And then all of a sudden you come at me with like, oh, here is a 9-hour film. Like, that's insane, dude. That's a work shift and a 1 hour lunch. I mean,
yeah, you're hitting OT
that's a
at
bit
certain
of an
point.
investment, bro.
Yeah, you got overtime penalties coming. Almost a per diem. Just to give some perspective on this, the top grossing films in the United States at that time, just to kind of let you know what's going on in movie history, number 1 was The Longest Day. Number 2 was Lawrence of Arabia. You got The Music Man at number 3, Mutiny on the Bounty, To Kill a Mockingbird, etc., etc. So we talked about this, I think, last episode or the episode before, wherein the early 60s, late 50s was kind of an odd time. It was that William Castle era from Matinee, so it was where the studios were kind of like, what do we do? And the auteurs haven't really kicked in yet. So there were some good movies that have come out. Lawrence of Arabia is pretty amazing. I only semi-recently watched that in total, and I loved it. So, there's some good stuff, but just not quite the iconic big blockbusters that we're talking about from the studio. But then you get into these foreign films that were going on at that time, and there was some amazing stuff going on, i.e. Harakiri. I really enjoyed this film. Jason, what did you think about this movie?
Dude, I absolutely loved this movie.
Good.
Whole ass loved this movie. Like, personal top 100, probably top 50, loved the shit out of this movie. Also, really interesting thing. I don't know if you felt the same way, and might be jumping the gun here a little bit with this, but I got such heavy Tarantino vibes through so much of this movie. And, with him being an influenced filmmaker, I wouldn't be surprised if this film in particular was an influence on him. And he is my favorite filmmaker, so if he was influenced by this guy, it would make a lot of sense as to why I had that reaction. But yeah, loved this movie, and we're going to go ahead and get into why here. So,
right. So, I think that was when the Ronin showed up in the Pussy Wagon. That definitely had some Tarantino vibes. I saw that coming a mile away.
Is that how that one worked? It's been a minute
I was like,
since I've seen Kill
that's
Bill.
where he got the idea of the Pussy Wagon. It was in fucking Harakiri the whole time.
Awesome, dude. All right, well, let's go ahead and I'll tell you what, Ryan, why don't, I don't know, you tell us a good place to start.
At the beginning.
At the beginning, as always. So when this film opens, we're treated to an abstract image. It's not exactly clear at first, but we notice that there's both metal and hair arranged in a somewhat familiar composition. We've got harsh lighting from above as smoke swirls around the object and against a solid black background. Now, soon the mind's eye adjusts, and we understand that we're looking at samurai armor, while not being entirely sure if it's occupied. A suspenseful stabbing score, like something out of a horror film, underscores a number of quick cuts and Dutch angles that reveal the armor to be in a sitting position as the smoke continues to slither around it. Now from there, we cut to a flat shot of the armor, at which point the backdrop illuminates to reveal a traditional Japanese construction, at which point the narration from our protagonist begins. Now, shortly after that, Ryan, we've got a samurai that arrive at the gates of the Chinese temple, and that's when we get our official opening credits sequence. Ryan, was there anything about the credits sequence that stood out to you at all?
No, but I'm also going to give myself up here and say that usually it's during the opening titles. This sucks. It really does. But this is just, unfortunately, the nature of the beast of what we're doing here. So, I sacrifice for my art. This is when I'm usually starting off my notes. I'm writing some things, taking down some opening bullet points that I want to mention on the show and this and that. So I'm kind of organizing myself during these opening titles. This is a problem that I have with foreign films with the subtitles and the whole bit, is that I do feel like I miss a lot trying to take notes and look down and look up. I pause, I'm rewinding because you have to kind of stay glued to the screen to focus on, reading what's going on. But at the same time, I have to also look down to take notes and focus on my podcast. So
it can be difficult at times. I definitely find that it's a little bit easier when we're looking at some of like the slower films, So when it's like Solaris, and there's not that much dialogue and we're hanging on these 3 to 5 minute shots, there's plenty of time to sort of, kind of take everything in. For me, like sometimes what I'll find difficult is when you're watching like, especially Japanese animation. But yeah, some of the foreign animated films where there's so much going on visually because, it's designed in the original language, like to not have to read subtitles. So they give you all this visual eye candy and, sometimes when you're having to try to like soak in all of that visual information and then juggle with the subtitles that are coming in, like, yeah, it can be a bit much sometimes. So
yeah.
I do know what you're talking about, man.
So what did I miss about the titles?
Well, so, okay, dude, this was a credit sequence that I thought was just super effective, and I really loved it. So one of the things that we get from, it's one of those credit sequences where it just really gives you time to settle into the film. I feel like that's what a really great credit sequence does. Sometimes it can be just, a great little short film in and of itself. I would say that's sort of like a Zack Snyder credit or credit sequence often has that vibe, or like a music video vibe. Like the credit sequence for Watchmen is like an all-timer.
Sure.
But then you have a credit sequence like this where it just sort of presents the photography and gives you different visual images along with the score, and just does this for sort of like a few minutes. And I feel like from an audio-visual perspective, it just allows you to settle into like the rhythm of the film, right? So by cutting with the same sort of beats and using the same sort of images and sequencing that is going to come in the film, it allows us to sort of get in that mindset so that once it kicks off, we're kind of nice and established and ready to like just take off from the beginning. So I thought I did a really good job of doing that. And I really thought the music was interesting too. Just like these like super intense strings, like whoever was playing it was just like playing the hell out of those strings, strumming it really, really hard, which is, a different vibe than you get from some of the more, traditional playing that tends to be a little bit gentler or something like that. So just really kind of interesting though, the mood that it set and the way that it allowed you the time to settle into it. That's what occurred to me anyways.
Yeah. So this is, I believe it's pronounced Kuchin. It's the name of that guitar. We've mentioned this before, where it's the lap guitar that we've seen in movies like Kung Fu Hustle, and it was in Hero as well, which I think last season where we brought it up, and it was used as in the soundtrack of this many times. And it's that Asian 7-string lap guitar. Again, they used it as a weapon in Kung Fu Hustle to great effect, and it's a part of the score in this as well. And I believe that's what you're discussing in the opening of this film, and it definitely stood out to me as well. So much so that I had to look it up because we said we were going to last season, and I never did. And I was like, "Fucking A, here it is again." What is that called? And it's called
follow through, guys. That's what Ryan brings to the program. Follow through.
The Asian lap guitar, man, it's sick. I love it.
So and then after that, we've got the film that actually starts proper. And this samurai shows up to the gates of a temple, and he explains that he was on retainer for the Fukushima clan. Again, sorry for butchering the names in advance. And he announces that his name is Hanshiro and that he's arrived with a simple request, and that is that he be allowed to commit Harakiri. It's so hard not to say Harry Carey all the time because of that damn announcer. If the moon were ribs, would you eat it? That's all I'm asking you. Loved that Will Ferrell bit that character. It was so funny. But anyways, so he actually asks that he be allowed to commit Harakiri on their, supposedly honorable grounds, which if you haven't seen the movie yet, basically means committing suicide. And not just committing suicide, but doing so in a very graphic way that involves disemboweling yourself and making like a physical cross by going, across sideways and then up through it as well.
So Harakiri derives from two words, kiri meaning cut and hara meaning belly. So it means to literally cut your belly open and let your intestines gush on the floor. Cool. I bet you. I'll tell you. I'll bet you would have let me out of that dinner date had I committed to this.
Dude, if you had committed Harakiri to get out of that date, like I don't honestly at that point, I'll be honest, I probably would have taken that personally. Like, wow, dude, this guy would rather disembowel himself than spend another 5 minutes listening to me drone on.
Oh, Jesus. Well. That's what our listeners are going
I'm going to have to get back at him later, find some way. I'm not sure how yet, but... So anyways, and so one of the things that I thought was interesting, Ryan, is right off the bat, Kobayashi gives you some of his more sophisticated techniques, especially when you consider at the time, this is like you said, the 60s. So even just something, we take for granted a lot of the techniques and the things that we get away with cinematically these days because of the last 100 years of conditioning. There's this instance where it shows our main character Hanshiro and he's explaining his story, and then halfway through it cuts to the guy that Hanshiro was talking to now talking to his superior, which is the counselor, and sort of picking up the story where he left off. So even though it's this like immediate cut, we still very much understand that Hanshiro told the story earlier, and now this guy is repeating the story to his superior. And again, that's something where at a certain point in time, audiences would have been very confused. They wouldn't have been able to follow along. And I think that was right around this time that they were starting to do stuff like that and sort of getting that conditioning going to be able to do some of these more experimental techniques. So shortly after that, the counselor actually does grant his request, and he lets Hanshiro in. Now, Ryan, I know I just mentioned the photography and the credits sequence. You're a big photography guy. I know we've talked about, different films over the course of this program. Like Portrait of a Lady on Fire is probably the most prominent ones in terms of just like gorgeous cinematography. What did you think about the cinematography?
We talked about Lighthouse, Heroes over Saturation, and like that was beautiful. Yeah, no, we've covered some pretty films in this duration of this podcast. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So what did you think about the photography in this film and how it compares to some of those ones?
Dude. So for starters, I don't know what Criterion did or what these wizards do behind the scenes, but I thought it was so clear and tack sharp comparative to other films of this era. Even the restored version of Lawrence of Arabia that I bought on Blu-ray recently and watched in the best quality that I possibly could at my house. This is probably the most tack sharp, so much so that I was trying on this deep dive to find out what the camera package and lens was that they use, because if there's some vintage prime lens I could get a hold of that, they were using to shoot films like this, I need to know about it because I want to have that in my collection. The cinematographer's name is Yoshio Miyajima, and he shot everything for Kobayashi his whole career. You see that a lot back in these days where these directors and cinematographers and like the director will pretty much line up a crew and that's their crew. So if you go see a David Lean movie or you go see Kobayashi movie or what have you, you're going to get like a lot of the same crew with them over and over again. I mean, you get that today too, but people do kind of swap out here and there to get different looks or different feels here and there. But so I wish, I mean, all it made me want to do was go watch Kobayashi's entire filmography so I could see more of Yoshio Miyajima's cinematography. I thought this was fantastic. The lighting was cool. By the end, you get Dutch angles. There were lighting changes where the whole room would be illuminated and then all of a sudden the lighting would close in on one person, almost like a stage play, kind of like what we've seen like in High Low from last season. We saw some different things there where we mentioned that the way it was lit, the way that it played out on certain scenes felt like a stage play. And this kind of had a little bit of that element as well. And, I felt like the cinematography as you went along got more dynamic where it needed to be and definitely played on your emotions that way. So, yeah, I loved it all the way through. Badass stuff. Yeah. And I noticed it right away, too. Like what you're saying, it made me want to go on a deep dive. And unfortunately, I could not find any information. So, listeners, if you are out there and you know more about Asian cinematography and like the cameras they were using over there, the lens packages and so forth, I would love to hear more about that and where they were getting that stuff.
Definitely. And it's one of these things, too, where you can tell that they shot the hell out of this film, especially as it goes on, because especially like in the end, there's a lot of times where they're cutting back and forth on close-ups and like each cut is a different close-up, right? Like just at a slightly different angle, right? Extreme close-up, like modest close-up, wide shot. I mean, he just worked the gamut in terms of covering his actors. And I think, too, even just saying it now, a large part of that is probably because of the limitations of the set. Like, I'm just realizing now that we're talking about it, the whole thing really takes place, at least, because there's two elements, right? There's the present story, and then there's the sort of flashback story. Right. But that present story is pretty much one location. And there might be a few rooms, but all of those few rooms look very similar. And I'm just now realizing that at no point did I really feel bored, or did I feel like, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times, And I'm sure his ability to collect so much coverage and interweave that effectively, prevents that from getting bored. And then, of course, there's all of the constant sort of movement of the camera that he does. Instead of just getting, a two-shot, he does that thing where he slowly pushes in over the course of the entire shot. And we see this employed 30-some years later by some of our favorite filmmakers growing up, like Paul Thomas Anderson, who did that in Boogie Nights and Magnolia all the time, right? It's never a close-up. It's always a push in, with the camera sort of tilting into a close-up. And I think that we really see a lot of that style of filmmaking established here in this movie with by Kobayashi.
I would be interested to eventually get the Criterion disc of this to see what I need to look up to see what the bonus content is, because I really would like to hear people talk about this film. I want to find out more about how it was made. Like I said, I did my best. I looked up article after article to try to get some behind the scenes knowledge for you to bring to the table, and I came up dry. So I don't know if just not a lot is known about Kobayashi's techniques or whatnot, but if you're out there and you know something about it, please let me know, because I would love to know more about this. It looks fantastic. And like you said, it's very, very influential in today's filmmaking as well.
Definitely. Now, the interesting thing that kind of kicks off the story proper is Han goes and he gives this whole speech about wanting to commit suicide. And we then see that the counselor, who, again, is sort of like the manager of this estate, relays a story where they just had another samurai come and do exactly the same speech. Now, I guess technically this samurai would be considered a ronin. We'll get to that in a moment here. But what this does is this sort of sets off a level of suspicion. So there's now this sort of board of people, right, that sort of manage this property for this house of Liu, I believe it's pronounced, or Lai, I don't know, again, butchering stuff over here. And they're sort of discussing how they're the ones that communicate what's going on here on a larger scale. And they talk about how there's a scam going around for all of the different houses. So basically what happened is that there was a rash of samurais, and samurais are people that belong to a house, right? They're actually employed. And from what I understand, and Ryan, doing your research, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if those samurai no longer become employed, if the leader of their house gets exiled in this case, or whatever happens, they at that point become ronin, and ronin are basically sort of like mercs and free agents, and it's looked down upon. It's considered sort of less than samurai. Do I have that about correct?
You do. Right. So the important thing to know about the history of what's going on in Japan at this time, and seeing as how this isn't Simpsons history, I'll take the lead on this, Jason, and talk about world history. So to educate our
I've got
listeners-
nothing for world history. Absolutely nothing.
And for anyone, boned up on their Japanese history, or for any of our Japanese listeners out there, I apologize if I'm messing any of this up, but this is to my best understanding. I did a little bit of research on this because I'm very interested in Japanese history. I love this stuff very much, and Chinese history as well. Just all the Asian cultures, in the factions and the warring nations and all the tribalism and all of that, and the unification of these things under generals and all of that. So you've got about 200 years, you've got a whole period of histoy. And trust me, Jason, I'm going to summarize this very quickly. We're not going to go through 200 years of history.
Yeah.
So back at the beginning. Oh, Jesus.
The story begins in 1966.
We gave this guy a long leash. No. You got the Sengoku period for 200 some odd years, which started in 1467, which is the Warring States period. And basically, for 200 some odd years, you've got all these different tribes all through up and down the island of Japan that are a feudalistic society. So it's all about this person owns this chunk and that person owns that chunk, and they're going to fight it out. And then all of a sudden, this takes over that, and then they have an heir to this throne. But it's all these warring tribes throughout Japan for 200 some odd years. And then you had the Edo period, which Edo is another name for Tokyo. So that turns into Tokyo, which turns into the capital of the nation, and so forth. But the Edo period starts in 1603, which is where we pick up with our protagonist in this film. And in the Edo period, a series of generals or whatnot, there was huge battles that were going on. And eventually, after 200 years of this feudalistic warring of tribes, one tribe finally won out and took over the whole damn thing and was able to unify the nation. And so that's the Japan that we know today, pretty much. And it was done for several reasons, not the least of which was this was also around the era that you had westernization coming in, taking over and influencing certain parts of Asia, whereas before Asia was always kind of left alone and left as a trading route. So you'd have Marco Polo coming in with his spices and all of this nonsense, and they would trade and stuff with the Western world. But westernization was coming through around the 1600s, even to America, and all of this. And it was all done in the name of Christianity. So you had Christians coming to take over Buddhism and all of that. So finally, someone says, enough, comes through, whoops everyone's ass, takes over Japan, and in doing so, all the samurai that were hired by all these warring factions and belonged to them, and their loyalties belonged to their masters. Once their masters were gone and they're down to just one ruler, now they're Ronin, and they're left with nowhere to go, no play. They're basically run out of town and seen as outcasts. So they were like hot shit, a minute ago, and now they're jack squat and they're, begging. Yeah. And so it was a huge turning of the tides for these samurai, coming as being heroes, war heroes, and celebrated by their tribesmen and so forth as protectors and keepers of the peace and so forth. Now they're Ronin, and they're seen as shameful, bastions of the past. That's how it used to be. And so, so much so that, the ruler now is ruling through military. So it was all the military that was running with an iron fist, and it let the nation flourish, and it kept the peace for 250 years. This went on into pretty much modern civilization. And it's still that way in a lot of ways today. There's your Japanese history. And now you've got this Ronin, who's our protagonist in this film. These Ronin were all, rather than starving and seeing a similar fate as our characters of Grave of the Fireflies and going that route, they would commit harakiri or seppuku and kill themselves to maintain honor. So taking this all full circle back to Kobayashi, this was kind of a statement on peace, but at what cost, right? So like you lose humanity for the sake of tradition and honor. And so this was kind of his statement of how did we get here? Because this very mentality of state and tradition and nation and honor before self and humanity. I mean, this got us all the way into the kamikaze pilots of World War II, which, coming out in 1962, probably being filmed in 1960. Kobayashi was also kind of seen as a post-war director. He had grown up in that era in the same way that, again, very Grave of the Fireflies-esque, where he had lived through that, seen the results of that, seen what those traditions got his nation and where that ended them with the dropping of the bombs, plural, and the kamikaze pilots and all of that. And it's like, fuck. And so you could trace those roots of nation and honor and tradition all the way back to the Ronin and the samurai. And here we are. Ta-da!
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So should have a pretty good idea of what's going on now. And then that's going to go ahead and set up the backdrop for why our main character and at least one other character do what they do. Right. So after some debate, the board goes back and forth. We've got one person that's sort of advocating for him, a couple people that are like, nah, it's all bullshit, blah, blah, blah. They ended up deciding, you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's let this guy in. Let's see if he's got this honor. Now, and the whole sort of scheme that's going on is that these Ronin, that basically there's no way for them to get employment now. They're soldiers of fortune, and there's nothing but peace out there. They can't get jobs. Nobody needs them. So what they do is they go to these houses and they say, I want to commit harakiri on your property, because there's a legend, and I think that's interesting too, that we don't really know in the context of the story whether or not it's true, but there is a story going around that there is a Ronin that did that, and the house was so impressed by his honor that they ended up bringing him in as a samurai. And so now there's this rash of people going around and they're doing this, and the houses are sort of debating with whether they should just pay the people to go away, or whether they should, allow them to come in and execute themselves so that they can start to build these reputations and discourage other people from doing so. Because, even just this one house that Hanshiro was, that's 12,000 people employed. There was 12,000 samurais at that one house, and overnight they all lost their jobs, basically. So that's kind of what's going on here. That's why all of this really is important and motivates what Hanshiro is going to do, as well as this guy Chijiwa. So now that Chijiwa's been, accepted, it's going to sort of set the stage for what's going to set up the whole plot, right? And that's the fact that they're actually going to reverse what they said and sort of call Chijiwa out on his bluff. So basically they let him in and he's like, oh, sweet, they're going to make me a samurai because they appreciate it and this whole thing's true and blah, blah, blah. But plot twist, they actually end up saying, you know what? We're going to go ahead and let you do that. Okay, we've talked about it, and yes, you're right. You should go ahead and kill yourself honorably. The men here at the house would be so impressed, and it would be such an honorable thing to show them. Go ahead and do that, right? And then all of a sudden they start to sort of backtrack. This guy Chijiwa is like, I don't really know, da-da-da. And they're like, no. We insist. So eventually he realizes, yeah, exactly. And he realizes that he can't really turn back because they're being insistent. So, there's this whole scene that, man, brutal Harakiri scene, probably about minute 30 or so into this film. And gonna go ahead and set this up real quick, and then Ryan, you can let me know what you thought about it. So we're to this point where, like I said, the house has decided to call Chijiwa's bluff, and they're basically like, okay, go ahead and commit Harakiri here on the site. We're going to go ahead and make a big ceremony out of it. So they bring everybody out. They give him a spot to do it. And then they bring out his weapons. And they're like, all right, dude, so since you're a self-respecting samurai, you're going to go ahead and use your own weapons to kill yourself, right? And he's like, And then we learn that he actually doesn't have steel weapons. He has weapons made of bamboo.
Yeah.
And upon realizing this, they're like, you know what? Doesn't matter. Those are, that's your weapon. You're apparently an honorable samurai. An honorable samurai would only kill himself with his own weapons. Therefore, you have to commit harakiri with these bamboo swords.
It's
Ryan,
Nerf or nothing.
Tell us what you thought about this scene here, man.
It's Nerf or nothing. Yeah, he's got the Nerf versions of samurai swords.
Yeah, right.
Not sure what he was doing. So even after watching this entire film, I never really gathered what his plan was. So I can only assume that he was banking on the fact that they were going to pay him off, because we find out that
that's it.
He and his family are all in dire straits. His kid's sick, his wife's sick, and all of this shit. So they need money big time, like Grave of the Fireflies bad, right? So he goes in there and he's like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And then they're like, dude, this is really honorable that you did this. We're going to give you some nice robes. We're going to bring you in. He's like, no shit, it worked. And they're like, psych, here's some white robes. Now you got to kill yourself in front of a live studio audience. And he's like, whoa, this escalated real quick. And they're like, and you got to use your Nerf swords. And he's like, uh-oh. So pretty gruesome. He had to, because obviously these fuckers aren't sharp. They're like training swords almost, I would imagine, is what you would use bamboo swords for, is the only thing, because they're like safe, and dull. And now he's got to puncture his guts with this. Oh man. And it was so hard to watch. It wasn't graphic, just, it was, empathetic, where the way they closed in on his face, and like the fear when he realized the shit he was in, and how these things kind of the tides turned. It was akin to so many horror films that I've seen, where you think everything's la-di-da, and then all of a sudden, things turn around, and all of a sudden you got a nail gun, on your foot or something. It's like, it made me cringe to that, in the sense that you're going one way and then it just made a knee jerk hard right. And now all of a sudden you're in some shit. And the way, again, to your point earlier, the way it was shot, its effective use of lighting and close-ups versus wide shots to set the set and setting, and the satisfaction of the audience of lords that he's in front of, that we're all there, kind of making an example of him. Basically, not in our house, like this ain't happening here. We're going to make you fucking go through the shit, and then we're going to make an example and spread the story around so that nobody else ends up on our doorstep doing this shit. And, as we find out by the end of the film, they just fucked with the wrong kid. Wrong kid died, as Dewey Cox would say. So, anyways, it was cringeworthy for sure. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I said at the top of the show is that I got heavy Tarantino vibes.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of the things. It's exactly what you mentioned. I remember when Pulp Fiction came out, actually, everybody was sort of horrified by the violence. And then you had a bunch of critics and defenders stepping up saying, like, it's actually really not that graphic. It's just that it's filmed in such a way that everything lands with such impact. But, like, even the scene where, Bruce Willis is going through and, cuts the pawn shop dude with the sword, like, you don't see some super gruesome stabbing and there's all these guts everywhere. Like, it's just like a quick slice and you get a little bit of red across and then, even like when Marvin's head gets shot off, you see the blood splatter against the windshield. So it's like, there's a lot of moments in Tarantino films that end up appearing more graphic because of the weight with which they land. And I feel like that's part of this. And
the
dude,
Michael Madsen stuck in the middle with you scene from Reservoir Dogs,
exactly.
You know?
Yeah. You really see the aftermath. Like the camera actually goes away from that moment when he's actually doing the part where he cuts the ear off, right? So
you hear the screaming in the background, and you stay for a majority of that with Michael Madsen dancing along with Steeler Wheels stuck in the middle with you as he's you know, grooving, and then he dumps the gasoline on him and the whole bit, you know, fucking with them. And Jesus Christ, it's a heavy scene. But to your point, though, it's not hostile, it's not Saw, it's not graphic and gruesome, and you know, there's a quick
but dude,
scene.
it hits the same though, dude, when he's sitting there and he's just trying to jam like that bamboo to like puncture his stomach, and he literally can't do it, and then like he finally does, and then it's not enough that he actually punctures his belly with this thing. The second is basically the guy who stands there with the actual samurai sword and is responsible for cutting off the person's head to eliminate the pain once they actually go through with the act. And that guy just sits there and he's like, nope, not cutting your head off until you get that sword all the way from one side to the other there, right? Like a parent who's like, nope, no dessert until you finish those vegetables, mister, right? And he's like, no cutting off your head until you get that bamboo sword from one side to the other. And he just sits there and is trying to jam it across his belly. And it's so just cringe inducing. You feel it. And the moment where the second finally cuts the dude's heads off, it was like, I've never felt such relief at someone getting their head cut off finally. It was like, thank goodness. Yeah, but you should have put him out of his misery seconds ago that felt like hours ago.
It kind of, this is a terrible analogy, but it did also kind of remind me, I have in my notes, that it kind of reminded me of the Great Outdoors. Did you ever see The Great Outdoors with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd?
It's been too long. I watched it as a kid. I haven't seen it in 30 years.
Yeah. Do you remember the old 96er, the steak that John Candy has to eat, and then he eats it all, and he finally gets through, and he's like, well, what about the gristle? He's not finished yet, and he's got to eat all the gristle he's been cutting off.
Yeah.
And that was very much like, he's like, basically, he punctures his belly with this bamboo thing. Again, to your point, we find out that a lot of these seppuku performances or harakiri are done in tradition only. So you get started with it, but really it's just done as tradition for honor. But you get a homie that comes in that you're allowed to nominate, like, I want you, and then he gets to come in and chop your head off, which makes it quick and easy, down and dirty, in and out. And the second that he gets as a part of these lords or whatever that steps in, again, trying to make an example of him, says, finish your gristle or whatnot. And so he's got to keep going with this bamboo situation to get his guts to spill out. Then he gets the sword.
Yeah. Like I said,
that was a rough one.
That was definitely rough. And then we cut back to the present, and Hanshiro is unfazed. And he's like, yep, totally all good, here to kill myself, not a problem at all. A-okay, pal, let's go ahead and do this. And so they're like, yeah, all right. So that sets up the ceremony, and now Hanshiro is going to do exactly what Chijiwa just did. And to your point, Ryan, so they get to actually request their second, and Hanshiro requests a particular second, and it turns out that this guy's sick. And at that moment, Hanshiro reveals that he actually has some sort of a relationship with this Chijiwa guy that they just subjected to this horrible seppuku performance. And so... And it's these moments, Ryan, that sort of perfectly encapsulate what I loved about the film, right? Because there are these, not only are there these reveals that are actually somewhat surprising, you know, they're not telegraphed ahead of time, but it's the moments leading up to them. Like, there's moments where you're waiting to see what one person is going to say, and Kobayashi will do things like have his actor hold his mouth open a little bit and then slowly push into the camera and just draw out that suspense and anticipation for those 2 to 3 seconds while we like wait to see what the person's response is going to be.
Absolutely.
And you just, so you compound all of those types of moments over the course of this, you know, roughly 2-hour film, and it's just so effective. Like, it has such an impact, like each of these moments on top of the other, you know?
Well, to your point, Jason, you're on, I think, a total of 3 sets, maybe 4. over the course of the entire movie. It's an over 2-hour film. You're looking at almost 2 hours and 20 minutes, I think, 2 hours and 15 minutes, something like that. And it's a pretty simple concept. The whole plot is, we could sum it up in 10 minutes, and, it's a back and forth.
Well, we couldn't, but someone could.
Well, someone could. Yeah. I'm going to get into all kinds of Japanese history, and we're going to talk about Tarantino. But the whole plot could be summarized very quickly. It's a back and forth between one man going to commit Harakiri, a Ronin, talking about another man that we open with that kills himself with the bamboo. We cut forward, and then it's kind of a little bit of a Rashomon thing. It's a little bit like Hero with Jet Li, where you have a man sitting in front of a group of lords telling a story, and we kind of cut back and forth between that pieces together what's really going on here. And so, but pretty simple concept. But to your point, though, it's how he does it. It's the patience in which he unveils it all. And even when you know what's coming, or when it happens, it's done to such great effect that I found myself being like, fuck yeah, like get him, bitch.
Yeah.
It was there were so many cool moments like that and it there weren't many like hyper action scenes, although it does end with
Correct.
one. It's not an action movie. It's just these patient reveals and great cinematography, and the music builds and the dialogue and the acting. And it's just such a craftfully made film that it makes you really love it. And by the end, when you do get to some action, dude, honestly, if I had one critique of the film, it's that the action wasn't really done that well compared to what we're used to seeing nowadays from like a samurai kind of film. So,
but I think it also intentionally leaned away from that. Like, I think because most samurai films are kind of like crap story. It's like they're like action films, right? You sort of get like crap story, whatever dialogue, and then you have these big fun giant set pieces, and that's really what we're there for, are those big giant fun set pieces. But this film goes out of its way to be about the in between spaces, right?
Correct.
That's
what I'm
to
saying.
The point that at the end, when they do finally have a battle, Kobayashi is like, I'm gonna spend half of it showing you the grass just blowing in the breeze.
Yeah. Or just, them posturing, and kind of planning it out, whatnot. Again, very much similar to the water fight scene in some of the water fight scenes in Hero, where they would, there was a little bit of throwback to that, or not throwback, I guess throw forward, since this came out many, many years before. But yeah, just as far as you'd see the strategy of the samurai or Ronin, planning their attacks way in advance to know what their opponent was going to do and so forth. Oh, I bet you're going to do this, and then I'll do that, and so forth, kind of talking it out like a chess match. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then so what we learn from there is we actually do kick in that whole flashback storyline. And basically we see that Hanshiro is living with his 11-year-old daughter, Hiro, I believe it is. And he also lives with this Chijiwa character, who I believe is about 15. And they're living with Chijiwa's father as well. And they all belong to the same house. They are samurais under the care of the, like I said, Fukishana. I apologize for not being able to pronounce these things, but he's part of this clan. And, basically what happens is the other father ends up killing himself and asking him to take care of his son, Chijiwa, him being Hanshiro, that is. And so, Hanshiro ends up sort of taking on raising Chijiwa as his own to a degree, right? And so now we sort of understand, like, oh, wow, he was sort of like a father figure to this Chijiwa character
that we opened the film with, right?
Exactly. And he was just put through this whole barbaric sort of ceremony, you could say. So obviously we kind of now understand, like, okay, dude, this guy's here for some level of revenge, right? We don't maybe 100% know exactly what's going on, but it's like, okay, starting to see what's going on here, right?
Yeah, so it's you're exactly what you're saying. It's two samurais that are now Ronin. The master has already killed himself or been exiled. One decides to commit Harakiri to do that, and then he tells the other one, our main character, throughout the film, stay behind and watch the kids. You know, you got a daughter, I got a son. Watch over my son like he's yours, and I'm going to go to the afterworld, and I'll see you there. Great. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Now at this point, Hanshiro's making umbrellas, and it seems like he's making them poorly. He's certainly making them slowly. And we see a lot of, instances of him asking the landlord to, give him a break on the rent, et cetera, et cetera. And then the landlord ends up countering and saying that he should give up his daughter as a concubine to the Lord, because at least that way she'll be taken care of. He's like, no chance, no way I'm going to do that. And so his solution is to ask Chijiwa to take his daughter as his wife. And Chijiwa's like, I mean, that's fine, but like, I'm broke too, homie. Like, I don't know what you want me to do about this, because I got just as little as you do, right? But either way, he does end up agreeing. They end up getting married, and we don't see that ceremony or anything, but we cut to sort of them, and they have, they're living together, and we see that Hanshiro's actually quite happy, and the kids have had a baby. And the baby also, his name is Kingo. A little reference. I don't know if that was a reference to High and Low, but made me think of High and Low because it was Kingo.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. And the other thing too is we haven't really talked about this, Ryan, but the performance from this lead actor. Again, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but if I'm saying it correctly, it's Tatsuya Nakari.
Sure.
And yeah, no, he crushes it, dude. Like, he definitely, like, I got strong, like, Toshiro Mifune vibes from him.
Oh, absolutely.
And, yeah, definitely. And just, I think he did a very good job of being broken, appearing broken in this whole sort of present scenario, because by the end, we're going to find out that everyone he knows and loves is gone and dead. And, he's also, when we do see those flashbacks, like, he's very compassionate. Good family man, but he's also still strong and all of that. And so I just thought that the guy did obviously a really good job being able to strike those two. And you always felt sympathy. You were always behind this guy. And, I know sometimes it's with those quieter roles, it can be a little bit difficult because you don't get those big showy pieces where you get to rant and rave or, cry and have snot bubbling down or whatever. But,
dude, FYI, homie's still out there acting, by the way. He's still out there crushing shit. Yeah. Good for that
insane,
man.
Dude. Yeah. No, I mean, he's got to be up there.
Yeah. No, he's definitely up there.
He's Japanese. Our boy, Max von Sydow, MVS. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it is. He's Japanese MVS. Or
he's definitely Max
Christopher Plummer. Or Japanese Christopher Plummer.
Or Anthony Hopkins. Yeah, he's one of those dudes, but the Japanese version. God bless him.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was born in 1932.
Guys. Sorry.
So.
But yeah, so he does a really good job. But we soon see that his daughter and his grandson Kingo they get sick, and neither Chijiwa nor Hanshiro can get work, and they basically just start pawning everything. And that's when we see that the whole reason that Chijiwa ended up with those bamboo swords is that he pawned off the steel to be able to, feed his family and try to get help for their sick grandson. They literally don't even have enough money to have a doctor come visit the grandson, which Hanshiro admonishes them for, but they're like, dude, what did you want us to do? And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. I don't have any money either. So Chijiwa ends up saying, you know what? I got an idea. I'm going to go ahead and run out. I'll be back in a little bit with some money. But he obviously never returns, and by this point, we know why. Now, to your point, Ryan, there is a really effective shot after that where the representatives from the house bring the body of Chijiwa back home. And that's where we get the shot that I think you were alluding to at the top of the show where, they bring him in, they set him down. Obviously, the woman, everyone's grieving. And, as they sort of, go to walk away, like the lights in the background all shut down. And we just get this one spotlight from above that's kind of on the three of them, the dead body and then the daughter and Hanshiro. And, just some really artistic shots like that are really, really effective and serve to heighten the mood, in addition to just being like an overall well-told story. Like he was able to insert some, like I said, really beautiful shots and insert, a level of artistry in there that might not have existed otherwise with a different filmmaker.
Yeah.
So from there, we cut back to the present, and basically Hanshiro's like, look, guys, all I wanted you to do is not talk shit about my adopted son, right? Like, because that's the thing, is they're talking about this Chijiwa guy and how dishonorable it was that, you know, he didn't use his own sword and his own steel to cut himself, and they were going to teach him a lesson, and even trying this whole ruse in the first place. And by giving us the story, you know, Hanshiro's like, look, dude, like, we didn't have shit. You know, like, you guys could just as easily have been us. You know, we got kicked out of our house. We didn't have anything. Like, all this, the worst sin that this kid committed was, yeah, he may have tried to get one over for you, but it was in the name of keeping his wife happy and healthy, and also trying to, like, get help for his very, very sick son as well as his sick wife. And you guys just shat all over that. And all I'm looking for is for you guys to be like, that wasn't cool. Sorry. That way I can go ahead and kill myself and bring that to him. And that's basically, and again, that's one of those, you know, honorable character motivations where, like, he basically just wants to be able to take something back to Shijiwa in the afterlife and say, like, yeah, you know, you can die with some dignity now, or you can rest with some dignity. And they couldn't even give him that. And that's where, you know, the whole, I think your statement, you know, of the oppressive nature of certain authorities and especially of the government at the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where a lot of those sort of statements get made, I think.
Yeah, again, it's like, you know, you get peace and order, and you get, you know, money. They had at this time in Japan, they had a lot of financial success. The economy was booming and all of that, but at what cost? You know, I guess if you just wanted to go live your life, but when you, yeah, there was just no empathy for you know, it was all about honor and tradition and all of that, but it was also about the military ruling things and so forth. So there was a lot of conflict between that, and you lose your humanity throughout that process. And again, Kobayashi was seeing a lot, apparently. I don't know the guy, but apparently he was seeing a lot of that at the time in modern day Japan. So,
yeah.
Also, a little bit of trivia for you. I don't know if you knew this, but you did bring this up, and then we kept cruising. I didn't want to interrupt you, but Tatsuya Nakadai, our Hanshiro character, the lead guy, did
Yes.
you know that he was the inspector, detective, head honcho detective from High and Low? Literally, the next movie he goes to make after this is High and Low, and he's the head
No way.
inspector in that movie. So, a little bit of
that's crazy.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
Huh. So that kind of makes me wonder if, like, the Kingo reference is even a little bit more direct.
Maybe.
Because I don't know if you saw too, but, like, Kobayashi actually joined up with Kurosawa and two other Japanese filmmakers shortly after this to make their own, like, sort of little directors group.
Oh, shit. No, I didn't see
Yeah,
that.
kind of like we were talking about on a recent episode, I forget which one, but about how I was reading that Chinatown book, and, like, Robert Evans and
Yep.
Bogdanovich and all of them had joined up.
Basically, literally the last episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this was basically like the Japanese version of that. And yeah, it was Kobayashi, Kurosawa, and these two other guys. And I think
That's
in
what's
similar
up.
fashion, it didn't really go anywhere, but I don't know that it was necessarily because of, like, petty financial disputes.
Yeah.
Again, I don't.
Yeah, but they were
I don't
probably
know
running game
Kobayashi's-
over there anyway, so they're like, let's tag team this, you know, and see, you know, to pool our resources together and see what we could accomplish. Answer, not so
Yeah.
much, but whatever.
So in wrapping up the story of the film here, so it's about time for Hanshiro to die, but first he's got something up his sleeve, right? We obviously know that now he has this relationship with Chijiwa, and he's going to expose a little something about all of this samurai honor that they keep talking about, right? Because that's what they keep coming back to, is like, he died dishonorably. You know, his grift was dishonorable. His weapons were dishonorable. Everything was about, you know, honor, and dishonor and dishonor. And so Hanshiro's like, okay, so, you know, gonna show you guys a little something here. And before he goes through with the act, he throws out 3 top knots. Now, top knots, for those who don't know, is like the bun part of the hair of the samurai, right?
Right.
You can picture it right now.
It's
And
like a
so-
Brooklyn hipster's man bun. You just don't remove it. They can no longer be a barista after that. They're done. Game over.
Absolutely. And these 3 top knots belong to the supposedly 6 samurai. So I think we forgot to mention, but, like, there ends up being 3 samurai that Hanshiro requests as his second, and all of them are sick and not there. They're not at work that day, right? So that obviously tells him something is going on. So by the time we get to this reveal at the end, we find out that, oh, this dude actually went and hunted these 3 guys down. And 2 of them he was just sort of able to find, and he cut off their top knots. And the third actually made a big thing about it, where he visited Hanshiro at his house and he said that he wanted a proper showdown. And then that's where we get that nice battle at the end where they go into the field and we get all of the, beautifully shot fields and grass and swaying. Right. And, it's just as much about the environment and the wind and
the cover art for the poster for the film is all from that one scene. Yeah. When they're in the grass and stuff like that. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely, And so, Hanshiro ends up winning that battle, and it cuts back to show that, the 3 samurai basically all lied about what had happened, because basically losing your top knot is the most dishonorable thing you can do. I don't know where it counts. It's hard to keep track of where it is on the scale of being a Ronin, losing your top knot, right? Either way, they're pretty strict, and if you don't do things 100% right, you're a dishonorable, right? That's all it comes down to, which is the worst thing that you can be. And so Hanshiro is basically here you are talking about all this samurai honor, which is why you dissed my adopted son. And oh, look, the moment that it was convenient, all of a sudden your people lost that honor because they couldn't be honest with you about what had happened. So they lied about being sick and not being able to come into work. And then even when you went back to follow up and say hey, can you make it? They were nah, sorry, way too sick, got fever, can't do it. So he exposes the hypocrisy of these sort of counselors and the samurais and everything here. That actually ends up getting a rise out of the counselor. Finally, once and for all, he gets pissed off and the guards end up attacking Hanshiro. And, he's able to sort of deftly maneuver through the house for a little while, but he's also taking L's along the way, Ryan. He's getting sort of cut up and losing blood, and he basically fights his way to the armor. He grabs it, he chucks it at them in a sort of fit of rage, and then that's when the riflemen appear. But before the rifleman can actually shoot him, he is going to take himself out, right? So Hanshiro stabs himself before he can be shot, and it just leaves a big bloody mess there for everyone. Now, the last sequence is actually really interesting because it really just speaks to the nature of just them constantly covering up what's going on, right? How everything behind the scenes is not what it appears up front. Up front, it's all honor and respect and clean cut and this and that. But, as with so many entities and people and corporations and all that sort of stuff, right? There's so much ugliness that goes on behind the scenes that's constantly being, swept up literally. We literally see them, sweeping up these dead bodies and sweeping up the grounds. And so basically the counselor is hey, yeah, these guys that all died by this guy Hanshiro's swords, they didn't actually die by him. They got sick and they all died. And so they're just perpetuating this myth where instead of this event happening, they're just going to sweep it all under the rug. They learned that the Omadaka guy who showed up to battle Hanshiro, he ended up killing himself out of shame, committing Harakiri. The counselor orders the other 2 samurai that had their top knots removed to do the same. We don't know if they do or don't. And then it just ends with them sort of cleaning up the bloody mess all over the house. And they're just going to cover this up like they've done seemingly so many other times. And that's Harakiri.
It all gets lost to history. Yeah. Yep. And then in that final scene, too, you see the 2 dudes sweeping up the mess in the courtyard. And the one guy picks up one of the top knots. He's like, huh. I was like, oh. Cool. I wonder if he's going to go tell anybody about that. Also, throughout the film, we see our protagonist in that courtyard. For starters, the one thing I didn't understand is why Ronin had to commit Harakiri in a courtyard like that. Why it was necessary to go to a palace or a lord's house or something like that to commit the Harakiri. Why you couldn't just do it in a town or in a town square or something like that. I would imagine, the monks that light themselves on fire or something. You could just do that anywhere. Why do you need? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with with the honor and the progression, like to do it.
Well,
in
but
front
did they though, or was that just part of the whole scheme, like the whole grift?
Yeah, I mean, well, I thought the grift existed because of the need to do that, not the other way around. That's what I took from it.
Well, see, I don't think it was a need to do it. I think it was like one guy decided he was going to try this thing and it worked, and so then everyone else was like, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's do that." But like, I don't know
but if
that
you didn't
it was
need
like
the courtyard,
the
why didn't they
standard.
just be like, "No, go for it, 100 yards that way, go"? Fucking
Because they're
knock
not
yourself
actually
out."
trying to kill them. That's the thing. They're not actually trying to kill themselves. They're doing it as a ruse to hopefully get paid. They don't want to actually die.
Get paid to do what?
To go away. That was the entire reason that Shijiwa did it, because
but
he didn't want to actually
Ronin
kill
would
himself.
come to these lords and be like, may I come here to do this harakiri? And the lords would be like, look, man, I know you're down on your luck. Here's, 100 quid. Just fucking kick rocks, bro.
Yeah,
and then get rid of them. But then it's like, but why'd they have to do it there? Like, why'd they have to kill themselves in this palace?
Like, why was it even like plausible for them to be approaching in the first place, kind of thing? Like,
yeah, like you come up
it.
and you're like, I want to commit harakiri, or or pay me, or whatever the grift is going to be. Like all those lords had to do was just be like 100 yards that way. Just go, do your shit over there, and we'll clean you up when you're done. We'll shovel you in a hole or something. But go be honorable over there. I don't know why.
I think it's just one of those things where like that's not hallowed grounds, right? Like,
right. That's the only thing I think
space is sacred because it's their space, and that's.
But what I do love is when our main character is, they put him on this like square pad or mattress of sorts, and it's all white, and they give you white robes and all that. I'm assuming so the blood can be spilt on it or whatnot. But right behind him this whole time, and in the original scene, when we see his kid there in the opening of the film, there's a mop bucket sitting there. And I thought that fucking mop bucket behind him was the most haunting thing of the entire film, because you knew what it was there for. Fucking crazy. One of the other things I took away from this film as well is how nimbly Asians run in sandals or flip-flops. Have you ever tried to run in flip-flops or sandals? I bust my ass every fucking time. I think Jimmy Buffett even wrote a song lyric about it, stepping on a pop top. So yeah. Fuck.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. You
always have a blowout.
Telegraph yourself. It's just flap, 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 right? But I actually hate sandals, dude. I am not a sandal person.
Also not a fan, and yet it did make me kind of go back, and now from here on out, from this movie in perpetuity forever, I will always be paying attention to the Asian culture, the Eastern culture, and running in sandals, and how nimbly they're able to do that. Fucking crazy.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I mean, that wraps up our discussion over Harakiri. Ryan, as always, we're going to lead right into 3 adjectives. What you got, homie?
For starters, I got clean. This is a squeaky clean shot movie. There is nothing I didn't love about the way this was shot, and it was so fucking tack sharp. I can't stress that enough. This is so crisp and really well lit. Loved it. Also, historic. For all the things that I went on a huge rant about earlier and bored everybody to where they shut this episode off and no one's listening anymore. Very historic film. I love this shit. I think I said on the last episode, I am also playing Ghost of Tsushima for the PS4. Also about the Ronin and the samurai and all of that as well. So this era of Asian history is my jam, and I can't quite understand everything about it, but I'm trying to learn more about it. It's really, really interesting. I'd love to get over there someday. Also, lastly, methodical. This is a slow film, but it's very intentional. Everything they show you is for a reason. Again, just like we said earlier, this film is very simple. It's on very few set pieces. There's not a lot to it, and yet I was glued to my screen for the entire performance. It was fantastic. And, I felt like it was never bloated. I was never bored. I was never looking at my phone except for to try and figure out history or how they shot it or trivia, because I was so engaged with how methodical and engaging this film was. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, dude. Right on. So my first one is just engrossing. This is just a film where I was in it the whole time, you know? I mean, there's sometimes where it's like, yeah, you know, there's certain movies where, you know, you're in it for the most part, you're enjoying it, you know, and then there's certain times where you're like, okay, you know, this scene's kind of maybe dragging a little bit, and then it picks up and picks down. But then there's those sort of, you know, for whatever reason, those films that just capture you, and you're just like in every minute of it, you know, and you're hanging on every sort of word. And this was definitely one of those experiences for me. And then I thought that the film did a really good job. You know, it was simple, but it was also layered. And I think that, you know, again, just where the guy shows up, and at first, you know, it seems pretty on the surface, and then they tell this story about this other guy, and then you're not really sure, and then they give you a little bit more that pieces this together, and then they make this connection. So by sort of introducing, you know, layer upon layer over the course of the film, I think it does a lot to keep you invested and engrossed. And then one of our, you know, patented hybrid adjectives, so to speak, flawlessly composed. This is just one of those films where every single moment the guy was in total control, you know, in this case, guy being Kobayashi, and knew exactly what he wanted, knew exactly what he was going for. I think that every single moment that he wanted to draw suspense out of, he was able to do so. I think that every time he wanted to be, you know, emotionally resonant, he was able to do so. I just think that every single moment of this film, again, he was in complete control and took the film exactly where he wanted to. Really, really, really impressive feat. Ryan, give us your formal grade rating for Harakiri.
You know, I'm going to take a page out of the Jason Peters playbook, and for once in my life, I'm going to rate this on the experience. And so my initial rating, I wanted to lead more in the B+ area, but I just really enjoyed this film, and I thought that technically it was a great experience. Story-wise, it was a great experience. I was glued to my screen the whole time, so I just can't give it anything less than an A-. So I'm going to go with an A- on this one.
Awesome. Love it. Yep. Deserves every bit of it. Probably will not surprise you at this point, or even just at the top of the show, to know that I'm giving this the full Jason Peters 5 out of 5 stars.
Wow.
Yep. 100%.
You're going full boat on this, huh? See, I think
going full bit. AA+, 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Whatever rating system you got, put it there at the top, man. This is an all-time great film that absolutely everyone should see. It may not be for everybody. Some of the sequences, especially that first Harakiri sequence, is going to be squeamish. But that being said, for as heavy as that scene is, I don't think there's another scene in the film that lands as heavy. So if you can, you know, find a way to get through that scene, that's definitely the worst of it, and you're not going to have to go through that again. And I also think it's very important to feel that level of visceral impact, because it's going to come into play later, you know, once the Hanshiro reveal, and we understand that Chijiwa was essentially his adopted son, right? Because now all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, that was a horrible thing, and now Hanshiro's motivation becomes much clearer. So yeah, full on 5 stars here. Recommend everybody to see Harakiri. And from there, Ryan, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look ahead to next week. But first, we've got some plugging to do, some good old-fashioned plugging. So,
but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. So by now you should be familiar with the fact that we are on the Twitter and the Instagram, both at Esoterica Cinema, as well as we've got the email for all of you muffin lovers out there. That's not a euphemism. Of course, we want you to write us with how much you are enjoying the muffin or pastry that you are eating right now, because we know that our audience is comprised of a large contingency of pastry adorers.
You fucking muffin eaters. Let us know all about it.
Let us know all about it at esotericacinema@gmail.com. Though I suppose if you really want to, you can also talk about the program. You can talk about myself and Ryan, how much you love us, how much you hate us, how much you find what we have to say worthwhile or worth less. Who's to say? You can also hit us up to let us know about what films you want to see on our Season 3 master list. That's right, as a reminder, first person to go ahead and send us an email with a suggestion for our next season's movie list, it automatically goes on there. I suppose as long as it's not XXX rated porn. We'll just sort of pretend that we didn't watch that. But yeah, so go ahead and send us that email with some suggestions or just anything in general. And then once again as well, individually, I am Jason Aberrant. And Ryan is either the Ryan Siebold or what? The real Ryan Siebold or _ Ryan Siebold? The other one?
Yeah, so I'm just going to take my own... I'm going to start plugging myself.
I did such a great job, though, dude. I don't know why you would do that.
You're doing a great job. Yeah, I'm the Ryan at the Ryan Siebold on Twitter and Ryan _ Siebold on Instagram. Because again,
Ryan _ Siebold on Instagram. That's the
I
one
never
always
planned
forget.
on people having to find me a long time ago, and now they do, and it's weird. So I got to figure that out. But in the meantime, yeah, just figure it out.
Absolutely. And also, as a reminder, we do have the website up and running, and it is fantastic, man. I got to tell you, I'm really happy with how the site's looking these days. We got a lot of content on there. If you haven't gone and downloaded the master list for this season so you can follow along with our polls at the end of the show, go ahead and do that. It's right there. We've also got a fun animatic for you, the Flippers animatic. If you haven't seen that yet, definitely go ahead and check that out, as well as some other info there. So once again, that's esotericacinema.com. Go figure, Ryan. Esotericacinema.com was available. I was shocked. I was like, man, this is certainly going to be taken. And no, it was available.
See, me?
So,
Not so shocked. Not so shocked. I knew it was going to be there.
And the last thing is we still got this giveaway going on. We're running a contest. That's right. $50 if you haven't heard.
$50.
$50 for leaving a review. That's right. Now, not everybody that leaves us a review is going to get $50. We are doing a raffle, and if you want to enter into it, all you need to do is leave us a review on the old Apple Podcasts. I suppose you can use Podchaser, a couple others as well. Spotify obviously doesn't have a review system yet, but yeah, Apple would be preferred, and all you need to do is submit a screenshot of your review to be automatically entered. 2 ways to enter: Twitter at Esoterica Cinema or email esotericacinema@gmail.com. Just send us that screenshot. You'll be automatically entered. And then on our next bonus episode at the end of this month, we will announce the winners. And then, of course, we'll reach out to you directly as well, just in case you're not listening at the time. So, but yeah, $50. Leave us those reviews, guys, and then let us know. All right.
So, Jason, since these happen
what?
at the end of the show,
yes,
and they're plugs, can
Okay.
we call this segment from here on out Jason's butt plugs? I think we need to call it.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's at the butt of the show. I don't know. I got nothing.
Man. Okay, but then what am I to do with my actual collection of butt plugs?
Well, that's for your other podcast.
I don't know. Maybe we can call it Jason Plugs Butts.
Yeah, filling the void. Yeah, I don't know. Jason.
All right.
with
Well,
Jason
I
Peters.
suppose we'll have to test that out. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a little Twitter poll or something on that. But if you guys like Jason's butt plugs, feel free to send us those emails and tweets. Let us know. Maybe it'll. If you guys demand it,
It's
who are
so
we to
past
say
my
no
bedtime.
to you?
It's so way past my bedtime. No more late night recording. Jason, let's figure out what movie we're watching next week so I can see how my week's going to go.
Let's indeed. All right. We've got a new film. And of course, we are back on that random.org true random number generator. Screw Google's fake randomness. We got 1 through 200. Let's see what the dice have to say.
Roll those dice.
Yo. All right, man. So the dice have pulled up number 68. So, Ryan, it occurs to me that what we should start doing, is we got to give people time to look at this, right? So, 68 people, all of you people playing along at home, I haven't announced it yet. You can go ahead and check it out right now. You know what it is. The people
I don't
without
even
the
know what
list
it
don't
is. I
know,
need to
but
pull
you
up my
know
list for this
exactly what it
stuff.
is right now because you have the list and you're looking at number 68 as we speak. So Ryan, I'm going to come over here to our list, and I'm going to look at 68. Oh, great, dude. This is going to be a fun one, man. I know this has been on both of our radars for a while, and that is a little film called Holy Motors.
Ooh, visually exciting.
Yeah. So, Ryan, you got a little description for us pulled up here?
All right, Jason, Holy Motors from 2012, 2013, depending on when you were able to see this. Looks like this is a French-Canadian film by, oh no, another butchered name here, Leo Carax?
Why do we do this to ourselves?
I don't know, man. Rotten Tomatoes has this as driven around Paris by a loyal driver, a mysterious man dresses up in costumes and plays a number of strange, semi-scripted roles.
That's it?
I have seen the trailer for this. I remember when this came out. It looked mind-bogglingly weird. Mind-bogglingly is a hard word to say. This guy's kind of an auteur of sorts. I don't know. I'm really anxious to see how this all plays out. It looks weird as shit. I'm looking through the cast. Apparently Eva Mendes is in this and Kylie Minogue as well.
Yeah,
Weird.
look at that. Yeah. And then to all those listening, it looks like we have got free watching options on Pluto, Vudu, and then Sling if you have that, but that's not free. You're paying for that. And then as well as Tubi.
But 92% Rotten Tomato meters, so we'll see. I've heard a lot of both sides about this film. Some people think that there's not a lot of substance, it's all visual. So anxious to see how it plays out.
Definitely. I'm kind of getting like maybe a little bit of like a Jean-Pierre Jeunet vibe, so we'll have to see how much that comes through.
Right. Or even Enter the
Awesome.
Void. I think not the butt plug one, but like the actual movie.
Are you talking about The Void or Enter the Void? Because those are two different
Isn't it
films.
called Enter the Void?
Well, Enter the Void is
weird-ass
the
visual,
Gaspar Noé one.
trippy movie?
Yeah. I've actually never seen that one. It's on our master list, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
But I actually haven't seen it.
That's what this kind of reminds me of.
But I have seen The Void, as you all know. You should all know my opinions on The Void.
So Holy Motors next week. Yeah, I'll definitely be checking that out.
Awesome. So yeah, guys, definitely check that out. Like I said, you got some free options online. Go ahead and give it on Amazon, YouTube, anywhere else. Holy Motors, 2012 French film. We will see you on the next episode to discuss on Esoterica Cinema. How many times has this happened to you? You have a sword. You're trying to find an exciting new way to commit seppuku. You could force your way into a respected temple and throw yourself prostrate on a white cloth like you would any other act of ritual suicide, but why bother when you can now commit Harakiri in excruciatingly bold and painfully exciting new ways using the Robco Super Bamboo-Matic 76? Yes, treasonous Ronin, the troublesome days of quickly cutting and gutting yourselves are over, because Super Bamboo-Matic 76 lets you do the job slowly and in the most physically agonizing way possible without all of that easy and painless cutting and gutting. Here's how it works. Own a sword, find a pawn shop, and trade in your steel blade. That's the whole blade using the Super Bamboo-Matic 76, and then hide the swords so nobody can ever possibly question your integrity and honor. Yes, it's just that simple. Super Bamboo-Matic 76 comes with 10 interchangeable bamboo sticks, a 9-month guarantee, and a booklet, 1001 Ways to Commit Painful Seppuku. Super Bamboo-Matic also works great with birch, oak, pine, and several other species of wood. Super Bamboo-Matic, it's clean, simple, and after about 5 or 10 suicides, it gets to be quite a rush. That's Super Bamboo-Matic 76. Never again worry about painless cutting and gutting. Order now. Pier 25, New York, New York.
From the imagination of acclaimed author Ashton Macaulay comes the next great American anti-hero, Nick Ventnor, in Whiteout. Nick is a bit of a lush, preferring whiskey to water and bar hopping to exercise. But when a mysterious benefactor hires Nick to find the lost gates of Shangri-La, Nick sobers up just enough to take on the case. Featuring non-stop action and a hilarious wit, Whiteout by Ashton Macaulay is a laugh-a-minute thrill ride that will keep you turning the pages until the very end. Whiteout, available now in ebook, hardcover, and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.